Thank you. Thank you so much. This is incredibly exciting. Welcome to the world premiere of Godfrey Reggio's Visitors with a live score by Philip Glass. We are absolutely delighted to present this film at the Visa Screening Room in the beautiful and historic Elgin Theatre, celebrating its 100th anniversary. A big thank you goes to Visa Canada. I'd like to thank the people that brought us the film, The Vivid Unknown, Films We Like, and Steven Soderbergh. This film is eligible for the Blackberry People's Choice Award. Please vote. It's a new voting system this year. Now to the film. Now, Godfrey Reggio has made 7 films over his remarkable career. He's best known for the so-called Qatsi trilogy. Koyaanisqatsi, made in 1982, Koyaanisqatsi, 1988, Koyaanisqatsi, 2002. Now, Visitors is Godfrey's first film in over a decade, and it is very much in the Qatsi tradition. His films have been called experimental documentaries, but perhaps it's really unfair to try and classify and label his work. It's really singular, visionary, and totally visual. The film features a score by Godfrey's longtime collaborator, Philip Glass, and we are delighted to have him and others with us tonight. Please join me in welcoming Steven Soderbergh, Godfrey Reggio, John Kane, and Philip Glass.
Thank you so much. Thank you, Steven. Thank you. Thank you. Can I describe in words a movie that does not employ words? To borrow a phrase, I not only can't, but I will. You know, I make traditional narrative films, and when you show a traditional narrative film to 100 people, the responses you get are pretty, prescribed. Some people like it, some people don't, but their experiences are generally fairly predictable and can be sort of put into a couple of large groups. If you show this movie to 100 people, you get 100 different responses because the film throws you back onto yourself and encourages you to free associate. And so your experience is completely different from the person sitting next to you or in front of you or behind you. I admire this so much. I admire the bravery of taking that kind of leap, that when I heard from Godfrey late last year that he was finishing the film and was asking if there was any way in which I could be associated, I jumped at the chance. I've seen it 6 times, but never with a live orchestra. So this is, you're the first people to see this film anywhere ever. And I think it's going to be an exciting evening. Please, if you can, if you have time, stick around. We're going to be on stage afterwards and have a little chat about what you're about to witness. Thank you, Pierce, for having us here. Lastly, and most importantly, I want to acknowledge the members of the Toronto Symphony Orchestra and our maestro, Michael Reisman. Enjoy, and we'll see you later.
Wonderful. Please join me in welcoming the conductor, Michael Reisman, and a full round of applause for members of the Toronto Symphony Orchestra, our very own. Now, please join me in welcoming executive producer Steven Soderbergh, producer John Kane, composer Philip Glass, and the director Godfrey Reggio. I will leave you.
Okay. Give that to Philip, I guess?
Yes, I will.
Thank you. Well, I think the question that's on everyone's mind is there anything you want to ask me? Godfrey, can we talk about, I know he's way over there. How do these films begin for you, and when they do begin, how do you begin to articulate them to the people that you want to collaborate with?
Well, that's a very good question. At the risk of sounding like I've lost my mind, they begin with mental illness. Let me try to explain. With Philip and with John, with Philip in the beginning, we made films about the world we live in, the world that's accelerated on speed. All of us are on speed in rush hour, outrunning the future. So when these films were finished, I wanted to have the opportunity to make another film. So I wanted to do something that would be completely different. I understood from the beginning, I was inspired by a writer named Isley that said that as human beings, we have not seen ourselves until we've been seen through the eyes of another animal. So, as it were, the diva of this film is Trishka, the female lowland gorilla. Trishka is the adult in the room. We are the King Kong swinging by our TALES from the trees. And this film is not to give you information. It's not to give you a specific meaning. It's really to inflict you, to watermark you, to give you an impression. If you saw the sunset with your sweetheart, you certainly wouldn't ask him or her, what does the sunset mean? The sunset has no meaning, however, it can be meaningful. And what this film tries to do is offer you a meaningful experience. And that experience is free. It's up to you, because as weird as this is going to sound, the subject of this film is you watching the film. In that sense, it's like an artopsy. It's to see with one's own eyes that which is in front of you. I could go on, but let's move it forward.
No, that didn't meet my definition of weird at all. So, Philip, Koyaanisqatsi came out 30 years ago this year. It was your first film score. How did this call come into you? When Godfrey hadn't made a film before, suddenly you're getting this call about this? How did this all start?
Well, the first thing I told him was that I didn't write film music, so that he should probably look elsewhere. And he didn't look. He stayed around New York. He came in from Santa Fe. And a mutual friend called me and said, look, why don't you go and look at what it's done? Then you can go home, and that'll be that. And I went, we were at Jonas Megas' Cinematheque at 80 Worcester Street. He had it for the afternoon. And I think he showed me probably the first reel of Koyaanisqatsi. And he did a damn incredible, he did a very shrewd strategy. He said, I want to play this. It's about 8 or 10 minutes long. I'll play it with 2 scores. And he played one with some electronic music, and the second score was mine. just took music of mine, and he said, well, as you can see, your music really works a lot better. And of course, I agreed. And I didn't realize it, but I kind of had agreed to do the film score by this. So it was a very simple, I was outmaneuvered before I even had a chance. But I also, to be truthful, I never thought we'd finish that film. I said, no one's going to watch, but I loved working. I said, this is something I really would like to do. And I got involved with working on it, and I stayed with it through the end. And I never thought we'd finish it, and I never thought anybody would see it. And I was wrong all 3 times about the thing. But that's how we began. And I think I was just looking at this today about what was so interesting was that in a funny way, I think the strategy of the film, as Godfrey has described it, is, in a way, it's always been there, but it's revealed now. The film really is about watching a film. I think that was true of the earlier films, but it was loaded in with other ideas or ideas about technology and about the society, and they were interesting. But when I look back on it now, this seems to me that the fundamental relationship with the film is the one he just described. And if I may say one thing more about that, I won't stay on it this much longer, that when I'm watching it tonight, and in a way, this first time I saw it on the big screen in this way, the way you've seen it tonight. We saw it in a different way before that. But I realized that with the function of the music here, and probably in the other thing, the music and the image works together. The music, what it provides for the spectator is that it gathers the attention of the spectator and keeps it on the film. But then you can look at it another way. You can say that the film gathers the spectator's attention to listen to the music. And I would say that they're both true. That both of the way of listening, the way of seeing are parallel strategies, and they work together at the same time.
Well, how fluid is this conversation? Do you say, I'm sorry, please clap. How fluid is this conversation in the sense of are you delivering a piece and Godfrey, you're cutting to it? Do you say to him, I need an 8-minute suite?
No, it's back and forth the whole time. It's like giving yourself a haircut, you know? It's back and forth, fixing it up, making it work. Did you like that, John? But
I cut my own hair.
The real word about making a film like this is what as it should be, and as we know that films really are. It's as like opera. It's a collaborative exercise. It's the one as like opera. It is the king and queen of collaboration. It brings together all kinds of talent, and that talent working together is what. And one of the interesting things about the way Godfrey works, since he wasn't a filmmaker when he began, he didn't use the industry procedures, so he made up his own way of working, which meant that we all worked together from the beginning, from the first reel. In those days we said reels, but let's say from the first frame. Well, we don't have frames anymore either. But from the first moment that it's a collaborative work, and that's that kind of symbiosis of talent of bringing it together. I think it's not a question of making films and adding the music, or making the music or adding the film, or it's really it's a complete discussion that happens for usually about a year. But before that, Godfrey talked. If you work with Godfrey, he'll talk to you for 10 years before you make the movie.
And Godfrey, how did you and John begin to work together and describe that close collaboration?
Well, let me say this, that I always try to work with people more talented than I am. And that's why I work with John Kane. And since the house is dark, I won't embarrass the rest of the crew, but through John, an enormous, beautiful crew came to me. The crew at Optic Nerve in Brooklyn. Most of them are 30 or under. Whoa. And let me say this. I feel like a deaf person working through the ears of Philip, certainly a blind person working through the clarity and artistic vision of John Kane and his beautiful crew. Without John Kane and, of course, Philip, but I want to stress John and his crew, this film would not be made. This is not a film by one person. It's a film, as you said, by collaboration. And collaboration is by far the most difficult form of art. You know that all of us have egos about the size of the Elgin Theater. However, if we have vanity of ego, as Philip has reminded me many times, then there's no possibility to collaborate. So I want to say, really, without John Kane, this film would not be here for you. So thank you, John Kane.
Okay, so John, how inarticulate is Godfrey exactly when he first begins to discuss an idea, or he says, "I have an idea. You know, I've got the next one." How does that? What's that like?
It's tricky, but it's very interesting. Godfrey works from his mind, obviously, and from the written word. And my job, I'm sort of the universal joiner, the conduit between his brain and the movie screen. So his early, he's very specific in a very poetic and, coded sort of way. So my job is to interpret his intentions into the real world of creating images, shooting. Filmmaking is a cumbersome art form. It's not like drawing or painting where you can just sort of, not that that's easy, but you can revise much easier than filmmaking. You've got crews and locations and things and all kinds of stuff and money. So my job was really to interpret and help Godfrey interpret his ideas to the actual screen. And his notes and his books and his copious, we had these 3 huge whiteboards, white dry erase boards up in the studio. We took pictures of them every day. We're going to make a book of this. I understood what he was getting at. I think I understood it as much as I needed to in order to make the pictures that would bring this to life. But most people that looked at the boards, they do look like the scrawling's a little bit of a madman. But we had a lot of discussions, and we basically were working with creating a new language together. And I think that's a big part of what the film is about also, is that we're using the familiar lexicon of cinema. Everybody in all the generations that are alive now have gone to movies and know how they work normally. And so we're trying to use this familiar form in a new kind of a way. Not that there aren't other experimental films and a whole history of experimental films, but we're working with the language of cinema in a way that's very personal to Godfrey's vision. And so my job is to realize that on the screen.
So Philip, how daunting is it as the collaboration continues to know, well, each time out, we got to do something different.
Well,
like we can't do what we did before, and that's on you.
Actually, that's one of the first things that Godfrey says. Well, of course, the new score will have to be completely different. But the odd thing is that they are different. It has turned out that way. Now, this particular one was written directly for the orchestra. The other included orchestras in different ways, but this one was written directly for the orchestra, and that was always the idea of that one, that it would be that way.
Well, talk about how that how did that come up? Was that your decision, or Godfrey? Did you talk about that?
The scoring will usually be mine, but in fact, what really happens is that we spend a lot of time listening to Godfrey and listening and going to John's studio and watching things and looking at things. The music comes out of that, my encounters, and saying, well, what is the music supposed to do?
But the fact that it was going to be an orchestral score was born out of what? This is a phase that
I
that
don't know.
you're
I
in
just
now.
thought it was time to do it. And also we had with Michael as conduct, his work with me for a long time. We've crossed this bridge many, many times where we've been playing. We've gone back and done the earlier films with orchestras now too. But it was also my feeling that, and Godfrey's always wanted, his stress that he's always wanted to have a premiere night with a live orchestra. It took him 35 years to get it. Here it is. We actually did it.
Yeah.
But I just want to say something. This is a point that I don't want to be, that shouldn't be overlooked. Having a live performance and having a live orchestra is very different from a synchronized soundtrack. By doing that, it's not just that, you can hear that it's a live orchestra, you can feel it. And by doing that, we have taken the film world and put it into the world of performance, live performance. And that's an astonishing, it's a bit of a hat trick all by itself. That I know that there's a lot of interest in continuing to do it in the live. Of course, in the end, there will be many more people who will see it in a picture house without an orchestra. But by doing it this way, the first night, I think that Godfrey's intent was to convince people that this is the optimum way of hearing it. And by bringing live performance into a pre-recorded art form, it's brought about a huge transformation in the way we experience it. That cannot be overlooked. By the way, we were inspired, Michael and I, by the Napoleon film with Carmine Coppola was conducting. We saw that in Radio City Music Hall in 1981 or 82. We'd just been working on Koyaanisqatsi, and I remember I said, Michael, we've got to go and see this. Godfrey got us to go and see it. And then I said to Michael, we can do this. We were inspired by what we saw, and we saw what happened when live music was added to a film. And this is, of course, something that had been forgotten. Of course, in the old days, there was live music, but then that was kind of left aside when we got into the talkies and all that stuff. But now we're coming back to that idea, and I think Godfrey has always been intent on that, and I think that just being able to do that this first night within this a very fine orchestra and a very fine conductor, that was a big addition to the experience.
Can I just say that we the big thing for me and the crew and everyone in Godfrey watching the film live, we would spend days, sometimes weeks, deciding on on a cut. Is it a frame here or a frame there? And so obviously the sync of the live. Anyway, I just want to acknowledge what an incredible job this members of the Toronto Symphony Orchestra did, and Michael Reisman. Like, really, really incredible.
Well, one last comment about that. By doing it as a live synchronization, it will be a little different, and there will be a flow to the music that it would never have if there were a click track to it. It's that flow. That kind of an organic flow that comes right out of the orchestra pit, and it's what I think is what captures. When I talked about attention before, it's what seals the attention, I think.
So Godfrey, Koyaanisqatsi comes out 30 years ago, and within minutes, all of the sort of visual and editorial ideas that you created for that film become assimilated by films, commercials, music video. Like it just all got sort of swallowed immediately. Obviously, my experience of the entertainment industry, if these films exist in the entertainment industry, is that people just want you to keep doing what you've been successful doing before. And yet in each film with Koyaanisqatsi, Nakoi, and now this, you've completely annihilated the visual scheme that you previously employed. And I wonder if you could talk a little about that, how you do that. And I know that in this case, I've had the good fortune to see the short film you did, Evidence, which you should talk about a little bit, which this is sort of an explosion of, but it involves images of people watching and looking into the camera.
I wanted to, if you don't want to keep repeating yourself, or you try not to, it's repeating in that there's image and music, but if you take any other film or director of a film, they have actors and stories and plots, so they're repeating, but it's a different story each time. In this case, my own point of view is, as I said in the beginning, that we're on speed in rush hour outrunning the future. The stiller a person can become, the more heightened their senses can be. But for a film like this, it becomes almost like a deprogramming experience. Or if you, like I am, if you're a smoker, it becomes like trying to stop smoking cigarettes. This film, in 87 minutes and 33 seconds, has 74 cuts. Now, when you look at the average of industry films, the cuts are at an average of 4 to 6 seconds a cut. Kubrick was considered the master of the long cut at 11 to 14 seconds. This film is at about 70 seconds a cut. So this is really, as I said in the beginning, this is trying to inflict you with being still. And so in that sense also, black and white is very important. When films are in color, which 9 out of 8 films are in color, then the eye goes immediately pre-cognition, pre-intellectualization to the color. So your eye is wandering because color attracts the eye. When you have black and white, let's take maybe a presumptuous comparison, but if you know Caravaggio's paintings, he uses the black ground when he does portraits so that there's no distraction for the viewer to be entranced with the image. In this case, the film is based on the concept of the reciprocal gaze. Here you are looking at a screen, however, the screen is returning that gaze to you. What does that mean? It's up to you. Koyaanisqatsi had 383 cuts in it. Powakatsi had 483 cuts. Nakoykatsi had 565 cuts. This, with 73 cuts, is really pushing, 74 cuts is pushing the envelope. So in black and white, it offers you, and in infrared, which our eye can't see but cameras do, it gives you the possibility not to contemporize the film, but to make it more emotive. So to answer your question, the subject matter, while important, more important is how you deal with the subject matter. So it's not so much the story, but the storyteller. And in this case, you become the storyteller by virtue of this reciprocal gaze. Now, let me mention this also. You didn't ask the question, but we wouldn't be sitting up here unless we had angels that, for whatever reason beyond my imagination, are willing to fund projects like this. Let me tell you what an angel is. It's anathema to the business. An angel is someone willing to make a bad deal for love of the project. Okay? And so I want to share this moment with an angel that I have had the good fortune now over 35 years, because it's been longer than these films, to be blessed by his wings, Mr. Dan Noyes, if he's around, if he can stand up. Thank you so much. And Dan is my archangel. And now I'm joined by two other angels from Montreal, from Canada, Phoebe Greenberg and Penny Mancuso. Please welcome them. So in effect, they told me, Godfrey, leap and your net will appear. So thank you so much.
One more thing for Philip and John and Godfrey. When you're dealing with a piece of material that isn't sort of operating on the typical wavelength of a film, and in which the sort of the response to it is visceral, and you're not dealing with plot in the typical sense. You know, I work in a world in how you define, how you come to shape something, and how you define better is pretty obvious most of the time. You know what I mean? You look at this take, you look at that take, the take where somebody says the line properly and is standing in the right place, you go, well, that's better. Yeah, but here, I feel like you're dealing with something that's much, much more difficult to define, and how, if you can, talk about those conversations about how you determine what's better, and even how you know when you're done.
We spent a lot of time, first of all, when we were shooting the film, we shot first in New Orleans, and every day we'd come back and watch. It's the beauty of digital cinema, is we'd be able to watch our dailies that night in a screening room that we had set up. And that was the beginning of us. It's sort of like a baby learning to talk. We're watching the material, listening to Godfrey's reaction, talking about our own reactions, and very early on, we're trying to get a shared lexicon of what's good and what's bad, like what we're responding to and what we're not responding to, really from, you know, a blank slate. And so it started early. We're, as I said earlier, we're making up a new way of using the familiar language of cinema. I mean, it's a picture in a frame, and it's moving, and at that point things were in color. It wasn't black and white yet, although that was an early idea of Godfrey's to make the film black and white. But we sort of learned together in baby steps what words we liked and what sounds we liked. You know, how if you listen to some languages, there are a lot of clucking and clicking, and we were kind of figuring out, do we like clucks and clicks, or do we like, and that was the really interesting thing about the project. One of the many interesting things, and why it took us as long as it did, is we were making up this language as we went along. So by the time we got to a place where we were editing sequences, and this is before we had music, we kind of had a shared, and when I say we, it's Chris Besecker, the editor of the film, and Greer Dill, one of our key effects guys, Trish Gavoni, one of our two cinematographers who's here, and Manu Gallo, who's not here tonight, I don't think, another effects guy. Anyway, an incredible team, but we learned this language together. And I have to say, Mara Campione, who held the whole circus together, and without her, it would never have happened. But and it would all fed off of, mirrored off of Godfrey's vision. So it wasn't like you're saying, oh, well, this scene's supposed to communicate like tension, so, this person needs to look like they're in love. We're trying to create poetry in a new form out of these motion pictures. So by the time we got to the editing phase, before we had music, it was remarkable to me how we had a shared idea of what was good and what wasn't, always filtered, of course, through Godfrey's vision of where we're going, which, you know, changed and morphed as we went. And then Philip would come out and watch our assemblages. And that's when we introduced Philip to the language of the pictures, and what we did what's called marinating Philip in the imagery. So maybe you could take over from there, Philip, what that's like, and how before you wrote the music.
I don't. I think your description of the work process is good. I could extrapolate from that, but there's another element that has to really be said. The most important quality of the work process is one of trust. That's what keeps you working together. And I think we always, though Godfrey could sometimes, believe it or not, he can be inarticulate. But generally speaking, we trusted him. We trusted each other. I didn't, I never worried about the film very much. There's no point in it anyway to worry about it. But we've done it, been through a number of times. But we talk about collaboration. The trust has to be there. Then the process all the other stuff can happen. All the other stuff can happen. And sometimes I've been with Godfrey on projects where people left, and things got better, if you know what I mean. So, but that's, I just want to bring that element to it, because it's if we don't say it, it makes it less mysterious, if you see what I mean. And trust and respect are very much connected. But you have to remember that Godfrey and I, when we began, we were beginners at the film business, and we had only each. There were some very good people who have been around from the beginning, from his side too. But there was somehow we knew that we could trust each other. But there's the other thing is that whether we finished the first film or this film or any film, I never was really sure we'd finish any of them, to be truthful. But we just did it. It was. There was nowhere else to go. There was nowhere else to get out of it except to go through it.
Godfrey, I only know, I was an executive producer on Koyaanisqatsi, so I got a little bit of a glimpse into your process, and it seemed to me that the process and the collaboration was the most enjoyable aspect of the piece, that the result was going to be whatever it was going to be, but that for you, just the experience of it and the whole conversation that began and ended, over the course of years was really what you valued. When you're not working, what are you having conversations with yourself about the next thing, or what?
Pretty much. This is not a job. That's what I said in the beginning. I said that in kind of a jest, like it's mental illness, but to do these kind of projects requires a commitment, not of grace and gratuity, but like to an insane asylum. It's like living the project, not being employed to do something. So I have three things: that kind of commitment I just described, acting as if I know what I'm doing, and having the right to useful unemployment, because that's what it takes to do this. So it's not like when the film goes, I'm thinking then about the film. It's not, if I'm not thinking about it, it's thinking about me. It's because it doesn't come from me, it comes through me. And in that sense, I feel fortunate, if not burdened by that.
Thank you. Well,
I want to also say one other thing, because it's so important. I don't want to hold you up, but it's not only those people that make the film, it's those people that create the opportunity for the film to be seen. So, for example, Linda Brombach of Pomegranate Arts goes literally all around the world creating occasions for live performances of these films. She also came up with the brilliant idea that not only could the ensemble present these films, but orchestras could. And what did she do? She got Koyaanisqatsi into the Hollywood Bowl. So I want to give a big shout out to Linda for that. I want to also say this, that over the 30 years that I've worked with Philip, it's not just working with Philip and Philip not with me. We both have organizations that have been together, in my case, 40 years, in Philip's case, I think 42 years, your organization, and we bring those groups together. Those groups make the film. We certainly are involved, but without Larry Taub and the guys that I work with and the people that support Philip, this would never go down. So it's bringing two organizations together that are like families that have the longevity of many decades of being together. It's important.
You do? John?
I left somebody out earlier. Now that we're in the thanking mode. Though it was a black and white film with not a lot of cuts, it was a very high-tech film. We finished in 4K, and Max Blecker, young Max Blecker, really made the technical side of this thing happen. So thank you, Max.
Thank you all. Thank you to TIFF. Thank you to the TSO. It's been a great evening. Thank you.